Welcome to Radio Express World News, presented by Vibha Ramesh, Los Angeles, United States. On Tuesday, United States Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin provided an optimistic view of the economic progress. He acknowledged that although the unemployment scenario caused by the pandemic is yet to be resolved, this is the quickest rebound from any crisis in the history of America. That said, Mnuchin and Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, stated that a stimulus package would help millions of unemployed Americans get back on their feet. Meanwhile, the wide rift between the United States and China became more evident or even intensified during the annual General Assembly. Stark differences in the views of both the presidents were seen in discussions that encompassed an array of topics, including global warming, human rights, international cooperation, coronavirus, and others. And the school board in Florida approved the plan that allows students to choose to return to classrooms next month. As per the plan, students that wish to return to in-person instruction will attend classes 5 days a week, while those that prefer to study from home would continue to do so. The vote on plans to prioritize initial doses of a coronavirus vaccine that was initially scheduled for Tuesday has been postponed to October during the committee's next meeting. The delay in the vote is attributed to the lack of sufficient information on clinical trials of vaccines produced by pharmaceutical companies across the globe. And on Tuesday, New York governor added Arizona, Minnesota, Nevada, Rhode Island, and Wyoming to its list of states from which travelers entering the city will have to observe the 14-day quarantine. Moving on, China's President Xi Jinping took a pledge to reduce emissions by 2030 and become carbon neutral by 2060. This came at a time when U.S. presidential nominee Joe Biden vowed to rejoin the accord and spend $2 trillion to cut emissions as a retaliation to Trump's withdrawal of the nation's participation in the international agreement to slow global warming. Commenting on this, Mr. Xi said, "Humankind can no longer afford to ignore the repeated warnings of nature and go down the beaten path of extracting resources without investing in conservation, pursuing development at the expense of protection, and exploiting resources without restoration." Following the association of 64 high-income countries in the collaborated effort to ensure faster and more reliable, equitable distribution of coronavirus vaccine, Mexico joined the COVAX initiative yesterday as announced by the World Health Organization. The vaccine distribution initiative will permit 156 participating countries that will mobilize resources required to clinch bulk deals with pharmaceutical companies when their vaccine is ready for distribution. The program needs financial assistance, for which the World Health Organization urged more support and participation from rich countries. That said, 3 major economies, the United States, China, and Russia, have not joined the initiative. Just as many important landmark events were cancelled this year due to the pandemic, the Nobel Peace Prize award ceremony has also been cancelled, as announced by the Norwegian Nobel Institute on Tuesday. The ceremony, which is usually held at the Oslo City Hall, will take place on December 10th this year at the city's university with a limited number of guests. Prior to the ceremony, the prize will be announced at a news conference on October 9th. Moving on to Russia, Moscow has now turned to be the hub of the coronavirus as the city recorded a stark rise in the number of new cases. In effect, the country reported 6,215 new cases in the last 24 hours, out of which 980 infections were reported from Moscow. Over to India, in a fundraising event, U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden declared the shared interests between India and the United States in rules-based Indo-Pacific region and stated that the two nations can together pave the way for a better future in the region. Today marks the last day of the monsoon session for the Parliament, and one of the points of discussion included the announcing of 11 retiring ministers. On Wednesday, India's testing capacity for COVID-19 rose up to 1.2 million tests per day. With a single-day record of 83,347 new cases and 1,085 deaths, India crossed the 5.6 million mark today. And in South Korea, following reports of storage issues with the flu vaccine, the plan to provide free flu shots for about 19 million people was halted. As far as the coronavirus crisis goes, the nation is fighting a second wave of infections. However, with prompt intervention, the country was able to keep the number of new cases below 100 for the last 3 days. That said, several million people are gearing up to celebrate a 5-day holiday next week, and domestic travel is on the cards. Over to Mexico, An investigation into the country's organized crime unearthed an unnerving number of bodies that were buried in common graves without proper autopsies. The article stated that while some bodies were left in funeral homes, around 25,000 were handed over to medical schools. Moreover, nearly 39,000 cadavers that were brought in for autopsies were still in morgues owing to the lack of capability to handle such large volumes. The investigation conducted by NGO Quinto Elemento Labs also found that the country's drug war was the primary reason for the death of around 300,000 lives over the past 14 years. An additional 73,000 people have been missing, with the onus of finding them left to their families with little support from authorities. Bringing you the last in today's report, the sale of the Canadian company Mountain Equipment Co-op to a firm in Los Angeles last week has triggered widespread unrest among its members. Their claim was that they were not consulted on the buyout and that the sale came to them as a surprise. According to Kevin Harding, organizer of the Save MEC movement, this is a business that's owned by members, and members weren't even asked or given a chance to come up with alternative ideas. It's just an affront to cooperative principles and values. Subsequently, the co-op's 5 million members gathered over 100,000 signatures on a Change.org petition and raised nearly $75,000 to cover legal costs. With that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Thank you for joining us. Please stay tuned for the next program on Radio Express. To receive Radio Express English news and English programs in your WhatsApp, please send a WhatsApp message, English programs, to 90727 95547. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Radio Express. Thank you.